in Los Angeles. I am the founder of Center Arts, which is a creative agency that centers artists, activists, and communities of color. I've also served as director of public forum at the Public Theater, and I'm an all-around lover of everything that Maddie Syed does. And so I find myself thrilled anytime that we're in space together. And this is just a really great opportunity for all of us to come back to a question that has really been a part of our journey over the last year and change through the pandemic about how we move forward and what transformation really means. So we're excited to hold space with all of you today.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. It was really interesting even thinking about approaching this question today with Brian and with all of you, because I think my initial impulse was this question, what do we keep? What do we leave behind? Was that it had to start from the frozen moment before, like the hypothetical before times, that is the moment at which we think of theater as being our theaters. And then I was like, wait, actually, what if I ask that question about today, about this very moment, about what do I keep and what do I leave behind from the way that things are operating in this moment as well? You know, as we're entering that period, I don't know about the rest of you, but suddenly for the first time this week, someone said something in a meeting, and I suddenly realized a bunch of people were going to try and convince me to get on a plane 4 times in a week again. And I was like, I don't know if I'm actually ready for that in terms of what we keep and what we leave behind, and what we value, and how that may or may not have shifted in different ways, both in our individual work and in our institutional lives. So we're really open to what that question means, and we're just going to try and create a space for all of you to ask it with each other in various formats, to really think about how we want to move forward from this moment.
This would be a great time to bring up our slides just so we can do some grounding and talk about the flow. So I'm going to throw an audible to our TCG friends. And I'm going to do a shoulder shimmy.
Until the slide is there.
Yeah, totally.
And if it never comes, it'll just get really awkward.
Y'all, we can do this audible too. I said we can do this a cappella. I just want everyone to know that we have slides in our back pocket.
One moment, please.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Erin. Brian's also really good at making slides, so I feel like everyone should get to see them.
Give the people what they want, more slides. Yeah, let's start there, please.
Can you see this? My computer is having some technical difficulties.
It's okay.
One moment, I'm going to see if maybe Erica can assist us with the screen share.
Okay, but for right now, I think it's okay, even if it doesn't become full screen. You know, we have the general context. I don't want us to feel like
I'm on it
has to solve everything.
Erin with the assist, or sorry, Erica with the assist. There we go. So what do we keep and what do we leave behind? Maddie and I are firm believers in letting the room do what it wants and needs. And so this agenda is intentionally loose and light to hold space for the connection and conversation that we want to discover together today. It'll be helpful just to go through some group agreements very quickly, and then to build off of the context that Maddie shared before we go into breakout rooms. And these will be breakout rooms of 4 participants each, where you all can share your voice around this question of what are you keeping and what are you leaving behind. From there, we're going to come back from those smaller iterations into the larger circle again, just to do some share out and some group conversation. And that feels like a healthy way to spend an hour and change. So with consent, I'd love to switch to the next slide so we can just review some community agreements. These community agreements, I should note, everything has an etymology, right? We're not creating gathering or facilitation in isolation. And so these agreements specifically were inspired by friends at Aorta, which is a really fantastic community organizing group. Jeffrey Jackson Scott, who is a dear colleague and friend, and the creative director of People Mover, and also lived experience, right? Every time we move in space, how these rules and agreements shift and change, I think is part of our emergent experiences as facilitators. But very quickly, the platinum rule: treat others the way they want to be treated. And where you don't know what that is, listen in to find out, or simply ask. And maybe Maddie, we can bounce back and forth.
Sure. Be curious, open, and respectful, both with yourself and with others. It's important to cultivate this kind of suppleness, softness, gentleness. Call yourself and others in, not rather than out. Throw sunshine, not shade.
Yes, sunshine. No one knows everything. Together we know a lot.
Permission to speak in rough draft, which I do even without permission. So thank you for permission to speak in rough draft. We can't be articulate all the time. Give yourself and each other the benefit of the doubt. Please don't be afraid to make mistakes nor to ask questions. Others may be feeling what you are. You might be holding the key that'll unlock something vital.
We take care of ourselves. Stretch, eat, drink, use the restroom, but please mute yourself if you use the restroom. Rest as you need. And next slide, please. That's you, Maddie.
Thank you. Take lessons and leave the details. Confidentiality. Don't speak for others without their explicit permission. Don't share something communicated to you in a private or safe space.
One mic, one voice at a time. If this support needs to manifest as a raising of hands, passing of a talking object, or building a speakers list, suggest it. Support yourselves and others in creating and holding the space.
Move up, move up. If you're someone who tends to not speak a lot, please move up into a role of speaking more. If you tend to speak a lot, please move up into a role of listening more. The up confirms that in both experiences, growth is happening.
Speak from the I. I do this all the time.
Am I freezing?
You're perfect. Speak from the I. Use I statements rather than generalizations.
Be conscious of intent and impact. No matter your intention, you are also responsible for your impact.
Real talk. Speak straight and say what's on your mind without fear and with bravery.
Be mindful of the real presence of power dynamics. Organizational power dynamics carry their own gravity. Be aware of the weight power title may take in the space. We all show up in this room as peers and colleagues.
Thank you all for your patience in reviewing that. Maybe this little bit of grounding in context before we move into smaller conversations. The writer Arundhati Roy had a really fantastic meditation on portals at the start of this pandemic. She wrote, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our databanks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. Arundhati Roy wrote this at the beginning of the pandemic, and how prescient that we're still dealing with this today. By my count, it's 429 days since Broadway closed. That's 1 year, 2 months, and 3 days. So far, 598,583 lives have been lost in the United States alone due to COVID. And we all know that that is, by many measures, a gross underestimation. So roughly 600,000 lives in a little over a year. So how we imagine transformation and growth is also paired with how we hold grief, how we understand loss, how we process pain collectively. And I think that's why this question of what do we keep and what do we leave behind is so relevant to me. I've asked myself this multiple times. I've been in many rooms where this question has been asked. And each time I find myself evolving in my answer, shifting and changing and unlocking something new. And so that's the invitation for today. If you know this question, invite yourself to drop into it again, maybe as if it were the first time, right? If you're familiar with this quote, read it back to yourself. Think about ways in which this might resonate differently for you today. If this is your first time engaging with this, lean in. Ask yourself with curiosity and notice where the question sits in your body. With this, if we could go to the next slide. We're going to launch into some breakout groups for about 12 to 15 minutes. We'll be broken up into groups of 4, randomized. And the question is, what are we keeping and what are we leaving behind? So feel free to give yourself, the help of brevity. Maybe take a moment to process your ideas on paper and offer those to the group in some concise way. Then build off of each other. And what we'll do is we'll have the conversations for about 12 to 15 minutes. You'll get a message when it's time to come back to the larger group. And then we'll do some share outs and then some guided facilitation work from there.
And I just want to add, if you're having trouble, coming up with certain things, I think just to really encourage you not to think of anything as neutral, to think about anything that might come up as something you want, something that you think is a value or something that you think actually no longer holds value. Everything is fluid, right? There's not some things that you have to make that choice about and some things not. Like all of the rules of our universe are fluid. So to really embrace that as you're thinking about this question, as you're thinking about what theater is and how you want to move forward.
All right, TCG friends. Do we have the power?
We are going to be working on it in just a moment.
Now it's time for another shimmy dance break.
Oh no.
Well, maybe Maddie, what can we model how we would respond to these questions?
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking about it as you were asking it. It's also tricky because for me right now, I'm thinking about it both institutionally and individually. And so, for example, right now, what do we keep? I'm thinking a lot about accessibility and what's being able to hold workshops, especially that people from multiple areas can access within the Native community. How that's been really beneficial for programming. I also am thinking a lot about health and travel and care of health in relationship to travel, right? Which is something that I don't think I really ever thought about before the pandemic, but now feels like something I really want to keep. But in terms of leaving behind, there are all the colonial systems that existed within theater before the pandemic that I was already, over and done with, but some of those actually feel like more potent and present for me as we move back into being in physical relationship with each other. What are the ways that I want to leave behind those systems and not revert to systems of harm? What about you, Brian? What about you?
What about me? I mean, I have been really interrogating my relationship to institution and whether the harm that I experience is actually worth it, quite honestly. I think a lot of the assumptions that I had about my career were based off of proximity to power and access and privilege and whiteness and supremacy. And one of the things I want to leave behind is the association of proximity to whiteness with my own value as a creator and as a human, right? That I'm more than my title, that I'm more than my relationship to space. I'm going to think about what we keep as we go into our next breakout groups. So friends from TCG, when you're ready. Hey y'all, this was actually a lot of fun. I feel like this is a really clever space and actually something that I wanted to name and lift up as a reason why this was an exciting invitation from TCG is that I know that we are counter-programmed alongside an executive and artistic leader session. And I just want to name that, this question of really transformation in our field feels incredibly important to think about as separate from traditional levers of hierarchy. And so one of the things that I want to invite, particularly to those of us who don't identify as executive or artistic leaders, is that we too have a stake in this conversation. We too have the ability to dream and to manifest new worlds. And so what I'm excited about is to maybe popcorn and share some takeaways or some learnings from your small groups. I'd love to invite particularly our younger folks, if you are in the room and feel like you want to contribute about your vision for the future. I want to invite our people of color, women of color, trans folks, non-binary folks to share. And let's just seed some initial sort of like popcorn ideas. What's really sticking with you right now around this question?
I'm going to continue to let it linger a little longer because it's Zoom and it's awkward. There we go.
Hi, my name is JC. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm from Santa Clarita, California, the land of the Chumash people. And I'm currently a high school student and a woman of color. And something I'd like to see a lot more and keep and see develop are anti-racism statements, anti-ableism statements, and so forth, and more transparency on websites on how theaters are combating inequality and promoting inclusivity.
Thank you, JC.
Thank you, JC, and welcome. Come on, high school student.
Yeah.
I almost fell out of my chair. Can we give a little pop to JC? Yes. Welcome, welcome.
Anyone else? Anyone else? JC already, stepped forward as a high school student with all of that power, bravery, and compassion of ideas. So I know there's other folks.
We had such a short time in our group, but I would love to just speak to both access, continuing access for to stories and from storytellers. I think we've done a really great job during this time to really reach out beyond the US, beyond our local homes, to bring in greater stories, and I'd like more of that. I'd also love to bring in a continuation or an evolution of this technology and looking at how theater can be used outside of the confines of the actual theater space, or using moving forward into bringing cameras into the theater or something, so that people can actually watch from their homes. We can have more accessibility to theater that doesn't follow that same model that we've been doing forever. We want people to feel engaged and feel like they can talk and be themselves and be free in their bodies when they're watching our shows. And I feel like our traditional archetype does not allow for that. So how do we break that mold and continue to push forward? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. There were some, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Our room spoke a lot about access and scarcity, which I imagine was probably common within all of the rooms talking today. But something that we alighted on that I thought was really amazing was this concept that, like, we've always had these tools. These are not new tools that suddenly we were given. The newness of these tools had to do with time and how much time we had to focus on using these tools to our advantage, which took us back to scarcity. We have this scarcity mentality that we have inherited, that we've been taught, that thrives on white supremacy and all of the isms that I'm sure all of the rooms have also been speaking about today, and with the hope to shed this scarcity narrative, to shift the balance of power, to increase conversations about creativity, and to remind ourselves that we're creative people, we're artists. We spend so much time building new worlds, and now let's spend that creative energy building the world that we live in rather than just the ones that we're putting on stage. It was an amazing conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Got hands. Do we have a formal system for dealing with hands? I wasn't sure because of the way that transition happened.
Not a formal system. I know Paul and Jacqueline had hands, and then I see there are several others as well. So I'm just trying to keep track, and if I'm missing you, put a hand up or drop your name in the chat.
Great. You said Paul and Jacqueline were the next two?
I think next in the queue, yes.
I'm Paul. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I just wanted to make an offer that ties to one of our group agreements. Maybe it would be really great to track this in the chat. So can we keep a running list there so that we all, great. And then what I also would love to say is if there are any, threads that you want to pull from folks who have spoken before, right? This isn't necessarily just the soapbox. It's also an invitation to connect to others who have shared so graciously.
So I'm Paul Savis, up in Bentonville, Arkansas, Tricycle Theater for Youth. I want to highlight something that someone said in the chat. I think Joshua, because I left the managing leader meeting to come to this one because this meeting and this conversation is so important to me because I think everything needs to be rebuilt and reimagined. And so one of the things that at Trike Theater we are really doing a lot of, I think, good work on is figuring out how we abandon working out of a sense of urgency. And adding, and I think it goes back to that scarcity conversation that we were just talking about, and adding more air and more time into everybody's day so that everybody is operating and working out of a sense of comfort and is got much more of an environment in which they can thrive because each environment is built to support their strengths. So that is something that I hope that we keep and that we think broadly about as a field, so that we can give people a better opportunity to live positively.
Thank you, Paul. Is Jacqueline next?
Yes, Jacqueline is next.
Yes, so in my group, hi everyone, I'm Jacqueline Flores. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And in my group, I brought up the interrogating that a lot of our institutions have been doing over the last year, and the care that I have been starting to do for myself and the boundary setting I've been doing and I've seen some of my colleagues do, and how I can make sure we keep that moving forward. Because, and I said this in my group, like my worth is still my worth 2 years ago as it is today during a pandemic, as it will be 2 years from now. And I think I've allowed myself to take that care and those boundaries because we are under a pandemic, and all of this like careness and interrogation has derived from a pandemic. So how do we keep it going forward and make sure it doesn't go away just because we're going to get through this, hopefully, all of us. So I'm thinking a lot about that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. Sorry, I lost.
Let's have Catherine go next.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Catherine. My pronouns are she, her, hers. The big thing that I came into this conversation with was I graduated last year right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I feel like I almost missed like the exit into the industry when I graduated. And and I've had so much time to sit and think about the industry that I'm entering in, and to sit with people who are in the industry. And one of the things that I really I feel like is really important, having just been in the education university area, is that the hierarchy systems in those universities is really setting us up to enter the industry ready to take like all kinds of crap and abuse from people who are really set into that power dynamic of like the director is God mindset or something. And that is going to be so important for us to work on dismantling, because that hierarchy system is going to cause us to just crash and burn if we let that continue.
Thank you, Catherine. That's super, super true. We shouldn't be training students to endure trauma. That's not a system that we can continue at all. Thank you for speaking so powerfully to that. Really, 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 really important.
Can I just amplify to draw that thread between a couple of our younger folks who have all, like, just to amplify to the non-younger folks in the room, that I love that we are teaching ourselves out of placing ourselves in situations of harm, right? And whether that is a note on a website or something tacked to your door, or the whisper network of how we take care of each other, our younger folks are really articulating that they care about being in safe and supportive spaces. And they're savvy enough to know which spaces are built with them in mind and which aren't. And so I just want to uplift that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Brian. Also, I just want to add to that. Something that I was coming to terms with recently is that, you know, like, I think that people make excuses for systems of harm in a lot of different situations because of these power dynamics, right? And at the end of the day, if somebody says they have a boundary and you are convinced you can persuade them out of that boundary because there's something you know, just see as desirable for a production or for a product or something on the other side, that is a colonial system of harm. That is a system of harm. There is no situation in which you pushing someone past a boundary that they have clearly defined for themselves is a good thing. And I think that that's something the industry really, really needs to reckon with, because the erosion of those boundaries has been seen not only as normal, but as a healthy part of the process instead of the harmful one that it is. Was Dean, is that, am I right in right spot in the list?
Yes, Dean is next, followed by Joshua, then Tara, then Leah.
Hello, y'all. My name is Dean. My pronouns are they and them, calling in from Massachusetts and Wampanoag and Pawtucket land. I have two things that I want to share. About the first thing is a request. I'm so happy that artistic directors and EDs are here, but I also want to recognize that there is a space for y'all to be having these conversations as well. That was an affinity space that was created for a particular like privileged group. So in my mindset, I'm like, y'all got a space. So I would really like to prioritize folks who aren't ADs and EDs to use this time to speak up. So that's a request I have just about this group. And I'm cool if folks are like, nah, that's not cool. We want everyone to feel cool. I just wanted to offer that. In terms of like thinking about what I want to come out of this pandemic with is recognition of like the recognition that I am more than just an actor, an artist, a theater maker. I was able to really fall into the institution of family and think critically about how I show up as a family member, as a community member, what other hats am I wearing in my life, and really dig deep into those places. That has allowed me to show up differently in my organization, in the places I work. So I'm thinking critically about how do I continue to be a family member, to be in relationship with people I love, and think critically about how then does that allow me to advocate for my needs in working environments and in those spaces, because I want to continue to show up for my family in the ways I've been able to show up for my family during this pandemic.
Yes, thank you. And I actually do, I think that was a very powerful point you made also, Dean, about the fact that there are some people who have a lot of opportunities to speak loudly and others that don't, and sort of balancing out of that space, I think is actually a pretty interesting and welcome invitation. So thank you for speaking in that. Joshua, is Joshua next? Did I make that name up? I feel like I keep losing the list in the chat.
No, I was next, but taking to heart what Dean just said, as a leader, I'm going to step back and listen.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. And I will also say, if people want to make space that way and put thoughts they have in the chat so that they feel like if there's something to contribute in a different way, I think that that's also probably very, very welcome, so that the conversation can still continue. Who's after? Who is? Does Powers?
It's Tara. Hey,
It's
friend.
Tara. When in doubt, I should just assume it's Tara. Just
No,
Tara
no.
out, and then I'm always saved. So.
No, do not do that. Anyway, well, he's Shea Estongo. Hello, everyone. Tara Moses, she, her pronouns, calling from the Muskogee Creek Reservation. These are the traditional lands, however, of the Osage and Caddo, and also the site of the 1921 massacre at Black Wall Street, and that centennial is actually in the next week and a half or so. Yeah, Oklahoma, a place. Anyway, so ruminating on these questions as a freelance director and playwright especially, is the notion of creative sovereignty, which did not exist pre-pandemic. And for those who are unfamiliar, creative sovereignty being having the full agency and autonomy to create in the ways that we, our peoples, and our communities tell stories best. And what that looks like is not getting notes from artistic directors. Like, I did not ask you to tell me how to make native theater, first of all. Anyway, but second of all, what I find to be like so invigorating during the pandemic is this lack of gatekeepers to create theater. I no longer have to whitewash my stories about Native people to make white people feel fucking comfortable about it. I don't have to bully them with my inclusion writers and my contracts that Native people have to direct my plays, that Native people need to be involved in all levels of power and creativity, because y'all, that don't be happening pre-pandemic. Anyway, and so this is like really what I'm looking forward to in the future, and how to collectively advocate for all of our own creative sovereignties, because we all have them. All of us have been telling these stories. And also to clarify, like, I'm really centering BIPOC right now, no offense. Also, I'm not sorry. Anyway, and that like we have been telling stories for longer than this quote unquote Eurocentric theater has existed. Anyway, so how can we collectively push forward with our creative sovereignty, not going back to pandering to whiteness, and really saying, no, I will not be colonized, I will not be assimilated. And I think that we have it's a really powerful and exciting time right now. And then like the last thing I'll offer, because there's so much wisdom, I'm just so excited to hear from people, is that like these predominantly white institutions, they absolutely need us, because like they be collecting us like Pokemon cards, and like they need that native play, they need these Black artists, they need this, that, and the other. Anyway, and so I think also during this time, what I want to keep is this increase of knowledge, access, and agency that like especially freelancers we have, knowing how powerful we are in this system of theater. And like, I ain't going back to be told that I'm just willy-nilly replaceable, because we know that ain't true. Anyway, so I just want to offer into the space for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Yes.
Bow, 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 bow.
All those
It's a
things.
reggaeton horde.
All those things, but also yeah, just to add to that, right? It's like the creative sovereignty is necessary, and like the pandemic has briefly created a moment where like the things that they were justifying as their excuses aren't present. And so how do we continue to call out those things as excuses as we move forward, right? Because like there's no reason for any of that. I'm not gonna say anything good the way Tara says. I'm just saying there's no reason for any of that nonsense. There's no reason for any of that nonsense. It's just white. It's just nonsense. It's just a bunch of nonsense of how we separate. I mean, like the fact that like there's these systems that actually say like, oh, you can only have one of this kind of artist because we need to make sure that our audiences still understand the work. Like, you were. I have nothing else to say. I'm just done. I'm just done with a lot of things right now. All right, who's next? Is there next?
I don't see any hands currently up, but that doesn't mean that no one wants to speak. So
we had Leah here.
Yeah, I took my hand off because I always tend to forget to turn it off early. I love what you just said, Tara. Like, no, we don't have to catch them all. Like, there's a whole thesis in there about how, the whole Pokemon system is just fueling into that. So yeah, and it's good to hear your voice again in conversation, not just as a another thing. Hi, everyone. I'm Leah. My pronouns are Leah, they, and she. I am on Eastern Shoshone land, also known as Northwest Colorado here. And one of the things we talked about in our breakout session, I was lucky that I got to be in the Brian Maddie breakout session. I won the lotto today. Was this understanding of self-preservation away from systems and how so much harm can be caused through teachings away from self-agency. And Catherine brought this up beautifully about the harm that can be brought about in educational settings for young theater artists of all kinds. And the thing I wanted to speak about was the thing I'm taking away from this and wanting to bring forward in my work is agency regarding touch, and how, you know, there have been times where I didn't feel comfortable doing the group hug and having everyone burst in and do the expectation, we're theater people, we hug. Well, yes and no. Touch is important to me. Touch is sacred. Touch is trust. So I am very open and sharing of my body with people that I know are caring of me, and to assume that this is the culture that we have, and that some people are not in that and they don't want to be in that. So it's not only removing my assumptions about what culture would be regarding touch, but advocating for myself more, like full on using elbow bumps, hand waves, good distance until I feel comfortable being in proximity to people. And I know that's going to take time, but I'm okay with that.
Yes, thank you, Leah.
Leah, can I yes and you?
Yeah, go, Brian.
Oh, well, I'm just so inspired because we talked in our breakout group about the duty of care that we have as artists and creatives, and shifting that responsibility and that burden from the individual to the system, right? That traditionally it has been that if you have an issue, you are the person that needs to speak up about it, because these systems are designed with very little access in mind, right? For those who are able-bodied, those who are comfortable removing personal boundaries, not designed for folks living at the intersections of multiple identities. And so what I love about this is, like, what we're actually talking about is, yes, our personal boundaries and our need to set our own agency, and that the system should support that, right? That we should be designing processes, from rehearsal processes to human resource processes, that actually support and encourage folks to have sovereignty over their own body, to engage how they feel comfortable, right? And that the system shouldn't break down those individual barriers to treat us like products, or treat us like commodities within the larger nonprofit industrial complex. So there's so much there that, like, I see Leah, and it ties to Tara, it ties to our conversations at the beginning. So I'm just like seeing the connections here. And thank you for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, and then we're going to jump over to Sam because I can see their hand up in the air. Rihanna Yazzie has this play Addie, and in it there's this monologue specifically actually about the cultural implications of touch. The idea that, like, you know, like, you suddenly are out in like white society and you have to shake people's hands and you have to hug people, and that, like, you know, like, now we're aware of it because of all these healthcare reasons. And I was just thinking about what you're saying, Leah, and that, like, actually no, like there should be an acknowledgement of, like, you know, what people's individual protocols are, because there is no normative for anything. And I think that that invitation for there not to be, you know, feels really, really, really important, especially at this moment when realistically, like, just on the Zoom call, sounds crazy, but I traveled somewhere for work recently, and I discovered that in different states, it's basically completely different in terms of COVID protocols. And I felt terrified entering a state where no one wore a mask suddenly. And it just made me think about, like, how present that is right now, in that, like, every single place, even on the Zoom call we're in, we're aware of those differences in a way that we're not talking about in rehearsal rooms, in a way that we should be talking about in rehearsal rooms, because we are all coming from different places and different cultures, and also all have different individual protocols that are necessary for us and for our own health and accessibility. So just really, really just lifting up everything that was just said. Sam, bring us your wisdom.
Literally so much of the same. I didn't even want to, like, speak during this session because I'm about to be speaking so much and, like, share so many of the ideas, but I just, like, I'm glowing with all of the offerings here. And Leah, this, like, I just new language for the same thing is, like, this Pondery play has forced a lot of people to begin having conversations about consent that have never been considered before. And like enthusiastic consent is so important. It's frankly, I feel it's a very easy conversation to have, to ask somebody like, what do you need? How can I show up for you? Before you start like digging deep into engagement with them, and whether that's in our artistic work, our social life, like whatever it is. And I think that beginning to see that conversation, those conversations about enthusiastic consent modeled over and over and over feels so important for the future of how we can be moving in relation to one another, and also really stop the other like very colonial, I see like rooted in colonial tactics, like the way of being that's very like, I'm going to start doing all of these things that are for you. I'm centering you at the end of the day. But like, girl, where am I in your conversation? Where? Like, it's nowhere to be found. Like, that's not cool with me. Like, if you want to be serving me, it is the simplest ask to say, hey, we're thinking about this, or I'm thinking about this. Can you tell me more? Does that actually feel in line with your priorities? Like, truly, that's it. That's all it is. It's that sentence. And that's it. I'm done. Okay.
Yes, yes. I have nothing to add to any of that. That's yes. Enthusiastic consent, Sam. Yes.
Can I link that to like theatrical consent?
Yeah.
If only because, so I have the pleasure of producing an artist named Troy Anthony, who's an amazing creator, composer, director. And we're producing this queer Black gospel ritual in June. And one of the things that Troy was really intentional about, and I'm offering this into the space because it's actually rocked my world, but I credit him, is this idea as a creator of theatrical consent, that the work that he creates, he wants it to feel good as it moves through your body as a singer, right? And if he is creating something that doesn't sit well with you, it's like, that chord is rubbing the wrong way, or you're asking me to say words that are inherently violent or like don't sit well in my body, there should be space to talk about it, right? So as artists, that we're practicing a mutuality that doesn't lift the creator on a pedestal, but actually like we're invested in nurturance as a form of artistic expression. That feels really relevant to me because, so like, let's talk about trauma, let's talk about Black pain, let's talk about exploitation. There is this assumption that particularly Black folks, but all BIPOC folks need to show our trauma in order to prove our humanity to others. And if that were true, we would be free by now, right? Because those stories have been written, those wounds have not healed. They get re-amplified all the time. And I'm actually interested in something different, right? I'm interested in a world where we have joy and abundance as a creative engine, that there is a way to create things that feel good, that are based in pleasure. Adrienne Marie Brown has this amazing book called Pleasure Activism, which is all about the body as a site of liberation. I suggest we all read it, particularly after a year of isolation and whatever that pleasure means to you, right? It's you in relation to your own body, you in relation to others, but thinking about ways that we root our creative process in consent and in pleasure that can help us move past the boundaries that were reinforced by trauma, right? That we don't need to see another, and I'm not saying slave play, but we don't need to see another slave play, right? We don't need to see another, slave drama to understand that Black folks have humanity and have survived through so much. We don't need another play about necessarily undocumented folks who move across the border, or terrorism, or, displaced Indigenous folks necessarily, because there's so many more stories out there that we have the capability and the capacity to tell, particularly that aren't rooted in our own harm and trauma, but rooted in our abundance, in our culture, in our bounty. And I think that there's something really powerful about tying that to theatrical and creative consent. So yeah, that's what's coming up on my heart.
I want to just add one thing to it, and then I see one more hand, which is just two little thoughts. One is that yes to everything. I'm thinking about this a lot because of Rutherford Falls coming out recently, which is like the first like Native sitcom, right? Like you don't get to see Native joy until now, and actually like the relief of that, like what it feels like to be like, oh, we can now break through this. We can go past, and we can actually experience joy on stage, and that could be acceptable, right? That could be actually a thing that is allowed to happen. Feels like such a breath of relief in terms of possibility, because it was just completely not even considered prior to, and also audience consent. And I think the reason why I want to make this tie right now is because of this particular moment we're in. It feels really important. You know, as someone who's also an educator, I've spent a lot of the pandemic, you know, screening old theater productions with my classes, and thinking about actually like how we engage with audiences is going to change drastically in terms of what their expectations are, what our expectations are, what that relationship is, what they think that they're coming to experience, and what those protocols are, not only in terms of COVID, but also in terms of everything else. So just really thinking about what we want that relationship to be and that participation to be between people, as opposed to, right, product-minded thinking, and that like we have a product and they're going to come in and they're going to buy it. Like, no, actually, what is that relationship between beings? What is that story medicine being passed between words, between people's mouths in the same space that is being shared? What is that depth of relationship? And are all beings in consent in it? Is there a knowledge that people enter into that space with? Feels really important. I see a hand up. I might pronounce your name wrong. Is it Sabine?
Yes, it is Sabine. Great.
Sabine.
Hey, just really quick. I think one of my biggest takeaways from this past year and change has been, you know, we've been seeing really clearly institutions failing us at every scale. Like our theater institutions, our like national, our like government, our like all at like every scale, capitalism, all of the things. And I think it's, we can ask for our institutions to show up for us better, and we've been getting clearer about those asks, which has been great. And I think for me though, the other thing is I've been learning that we can show up for each other, and there's been so much freedom in understanding that like just as much as we can look to our institutions, we can actually just look to each other at the same time, and we keep us safe, and we can make things together, and we can imagine ourselves outside of these institutions.
Sabine, that is the perfect note to help us land this plane with less than 4 minutes until the end of our session. Maddie, how do we feel about takeaways? Because I think that there's so much, obviously there's enough time for the right work. This was meant to be just a thought instigator and a catalyst for further conversations. So you are more than welcome. You're invited to take these questions and share them out into your world. Your friends, your small circles, your institution, your creative groups, continue to meditate on what it actually means to walk through this portal of a pandemic. And now that we're maybe moving through the other side of this, Lord willing, how do we actually take the lessons, right? And decide what we're keeping.
Yes, just I don't have anything profound to add to any of that. Everything Brian said, and just the reminder of all this is an invitation to question. You know, like it's not something that can only happen in any space. It's something that can happen in every space. Like you can ask this question about everything. You can ask this question about any individual story you're thinking about telling and why it's worthwhile right now, right? Like this question should always be being asked, because like treating systems as if they're neutral is dangerous and lazy. And ultimately, like this invitation to question is something we should all be doing with our communities at all times, especially now, but also always. And now, and if we have the ability to go forward into something that is safer, that is in person again, I think that what we don't want to let go of is the questioning that this period brought us.
My friend, it is so good to share space with you. You are such a nutritious individual.
I can't. The people, the chat is all gonna like respond to when I say Brian is like ridiculous again. They're all gonna be like, yes, that's Brian. He's like just a being of love. He's just a being of love. Stop it. I can't. I blush. I can't facilitate with Brian because he makes me blush when he starts doing the kindness thing. I can't handle this much kindness. I'm from the Northeast.
Southern, kill him with kindness and sweet tea. You know, that's what the South has taught me. Y'all, this has been such a fun moment, and I'm so happy to have shared space with y'all. I'll say for myself, to keep the conversation going, please find me on LinkedIn, Brian Joseph Lee. Reach out. We love to build connections and to move this conversation forward. Maddie, how can people find you and follow what you're doing?
They can't. No. You can find me anywhere. Honestly, you know, like I always accept more friends in the Facebook. You can look at my website, but it's gonna be boring. So, you know, just Madeline Sayet is my name. It's very easy to find on the internet, but I accept any form of contact. So if anybody wants to reach out or connect in any way, just do. Yeah, I don't have a formal, don't go through LinkedIn though. Don't do that. Anyway, because I'll never see it. I'll never see it. Brian, go through LinkedIn for me.
My LinkedIn, or like centerarts.com, CNTRARTS.com, at CenterArts at all your favorite social media sites. But of course, like, we can find ways to connect, and the invitation is open. The door is open, and we're excited to co-create the future with all of y'all. So that's 11 o'clock. Look, like Simone Biles hitting the landing. Bam. 10s across the board. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.